Imagine finding out that the entire human experience for the last, 11,000 years has basically been a medical quarantine.
Right, yeah. And not just, a quarantine in some isolated valley somewhere on Earth.
Exactly. I mean, try to imagine discovering that we live on an artificial, completely biological space station, and it's governed by this unseen alien council.
It's honestly the ultimate ontological shock. Because if you accept this, every war, every renaissance, every moment of profound human suffering or triumph, it all took place inside a sealed, carefully monitored terrarium.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're getting into in this deep dive today. We have this dense, meticulously detailed archival record from a civilization that is totally outside our own.
Yes, the document is titled 36-0, and it was compiled by an archivist who goes by the title A Pisces Without Vices.
Which is such a fascinating name, by the way. But our mission today for you listening is to basically decode the history of this place they call Earth Station.
Right, we're going to unpack the ancient tragedy that violently separated humanity from the rest of its galactic peers and explore the incredibly complex, heavily bureaucratic process of bringing humanity back to the table.
Because it's not just sci-fi world building here, right? It's really this deep look at bureaucracy, trauma, and honestly, extreme patience.
It really is. It shows how vastly different minds, alien and human alike, process reality and time.
So let's just jump right into the climax of this document, because it opens on this monumental vote in a place called the Chamber of the Council of 36.
Yeah, and the physical environment of this chamber is so crucial. The document describes a room that wasn't built but actually biologically grown.
Wait, grown? Like a plant?
Kind of, yeah. The walls themselves are made of this ancient biological matter, and it's been pulling the same gravity for millennia, so it's acquired this immense density of, well, witnessing.
Wow, okay. And so inside this grown room, there are 33 active delegations present. But across the chamber, there are three specific chairs that have just sat completely empty for 11,000 years.
Exactly. I mean, think about what that looks like for the beings in that room. 412 full sessions over 11 millennia, and those three chairs are just this persistent, gaping hole in their governance.
That's heavy. And the document zeroes in on the Anunnaki representative, right? She's basically the lead archivist for the council.
Right, and the record notes that she literally hasn't moved in 6 hours. She isn't physically frozen or anything. She just stopped reading the treaty in front of her.
Because the gravity of it just finally hit her.
Yeah, exactly. She realizes she's living in what her culture calls the moment before the record changes permanently. The era of the empty chairs is finally ending.
Okay, so the document they're about to vote on is called the Reintegration Treaty. And honestly, given that this is an 11,000-year-old intergalactic quarantine involving dozens of alien species, I would totally expect this thing to be the size of an encyclopedia.
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But the archive notes it's actually only 41 clauses long.
Which is crazy to me. Just 41 clauses for all that history?
Well, that brevity is a very deliberate philosophical choice. The treaty was drafted mostly over a 40-year period by the Taotians.
And they're like the big legal scholars of the council, right?
Exactly. And their foundational legal philosophy is that if a treaty requires massive length to be understood, then it fundamentally requires the wrong things to be understood.
Oh, I like that. So, if you have to hide behind thousands of pages of legalese, your truth is flawed.
Precisely. They prioritize absolute precision over volume. They basically distilled 11 millennia of trauma and protocol into 41 undeniable statements.
Wow. So they call the vote, and it passes. The Anunnaki record officially updates the human seats from absent, quarantine ongoing, to pending delegation.
But the reaction in the room is not at all what you'd expect.
Yeah, there's no cheering, right?
Yeah.
No big sigh of relief. The document says there is exactly 4 minutes and 11 seconds of absolute crushing silence.
Yeah. And the concept at play here is what they call institutional waiting. That silence wasn't shock or uncertainty. Every single delegation knew the treaty was going to pass.
So why the silence then? Just taking it in?
It was a physical and psychological necessity. This biological chamber and those 33 species had been carrying the suffocating weight of this quarantine for 11,000 years.
So you can't just flip a switch and go back to normal.
Exactly. Ending it required a massive collective psychological realignment. As the Taotians note, real things require time to move.
Okay, but wait. There is a detail about one specific delegation here that feels completely paradoxical to me. The Mantid delegation.
Ah, yes. The mantids.
Yeah, because the record shows that in the entire history of this quarantine, the mantids only spoke 37 times, and their final official statement on this treaty was just 7 words.
Because it is time. We will wait.
Right. So how does that make any sense? Why vote to end an 11,000-year quarantine, declare that it is finally time, and then immediately say, we will wait?
Well, it seems contradictory until you really understand how the Council perceives time, especially in relation to biology. They aren't waiting for a date on a calendar.
Oh, so no, like procedural countdowns or whatever?
Right. They're waiting for a biological and psychological threshold to be crossed within the human population itself.
I see. So they can unlock the door, but they can't force us to walk through it.
Exactly. But to truly understand what that threshold is, we have to look at the physical environment humanity is trapped inside. We have to really look at Earth Station.
Yeah, because this is the twist that just shatters everything we know. Earth Station is not a naturally formed planet.
Not at all. I mean, in the standard galactic sequence, gravity pulls matter together, you get a core, chemical reactions lead to biology, and so on. That's a normal planet.
But Earth Station completely bypassed that sequence. It's a deliberate construct, planned over 800 years by 12 founding races.
And it is entirely 100% biological.
Which is so hard to wrap my head around. How does an entirely biological planet even work? Like, you can't just pour water into a rock basin and call it a functional ocean.
Well, the document specifically details the work of the Arcturians here.
Mm.
They are the master engineers who designed the core systems, and they approach geology as anatomy.
Okay, anatomy. So they built the oceans as like a circulatory infrastructure.
Yes, it's a planetary-scale thermal and atmospheric distribution system. And the deep mantle processing systems, what we call tectonic plates and volcanic vents, they aren't random geological phenomena.
They act as the station's autonomic nervous system, right? Like maintaining internal pressure without conscious thought.
Exactly. It functions just like the human brainstem regulates your heart rate. And the atmosphere itself actually possesses a 32-hour respiratory cycle. The station literally breathes.
That is wild. It uses the ocean currents and the vents as lungs. And the way I try to ground this for you listening is imagine setting up a highly advanced, self-sustaining terrarium in a massive glass jar.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
You balance the soil, the moisture, the plants, you seal the lid tightly, and then you leave it alone for like 300,000 years. When you come back, the plants haven't just survived, they've invented their own complex weather system inside the jar.
Right, the system became self-aware of its own needs. And that terrarium analogy perfectly captures what the Arcturians encountered. They meticulously modeled the surface marine life, but they completely failed to anticipate the deep ocean ecosystems.
Oh, because they didn't model those lightless, super pressurized communities around the hydrothermal vents?
Exactly. Those spontaneously developed over hundreds of thousands of years. When the Arcturian engineers finally saw these rogue ecosystems, they reviewed the data for 3 days, and their final report was just 4 words.
It exceeded the model, which for a master engineering race has to be just a staggering admission of defeat, right? Or at least surprise.
Absolutely. The biology just outsmarted the blueprint. The document even mentions an orbital ring of biological satellites disguised as a natural debris field.
Right, what we call the asteroid belt.
Yeah. And some of those biological satellites are so incredibly ancient that they've outgrown their programming and developed spontaneous sleep cycles.
And the maintenance team just noticed them basically nodding off, realized it was organic evolution, and just let them sleep. That is so cool.
The station is just this perfectly balanced, infinitely adapting living machine. There is even a massive repository of data, the Deep Archive, embedded directly into the oldest geological layers beneath the ocean floor.
So the planet itself is literally the hard drive. But that begs the question, if this machine is so perfectly balanced, what went wrong? Why the quarantine?
Well, the answer to that lies with the original human inhabitants, the Lyran diaspora, and a very specific biological disaster that basically broke them.
Okay, so the pre-mutiny humans. The archive describes them as being incredibly loud, like they talked constantly to externalize their cognitive processing.
Right, but their most vital trait, the absolute core reason they were brought onto the station, was a psychological characteristic called low-resolution pressure.
Low-resolution pressure. What exactly is that in this context?
It's a very rare and highly valuable cognitive trait in systems management. You see, most sentient species, when they encounter an unexpected problem, experience immense, almost painful psychological pressure to resolve it immediately.
Like an urgent need to categorize it and fix it right away?
Yes, But humans possess the unique ability to sit comfortably with an unresolved mystery. They could observe an erratic system behavior for months without jumping to conclusions.
Just holding that complexity in their minds until the problem naturally revealed itself, so we were essentially the station's ultimate troubleshooter.
Exactly, because humans didn't panic when things got weird. But then the Nephilian virus hit.
And then this is the turning point, because the crucial detail is that this virus didn't cause physical mutations, right? No extra limbs or anything.
No, it directly attacked our cognitive architecture. It systematically dismantled that exact trait that made humanity so valuable.
It wiped out our low-resolution pressure.
Yes, and replaced it with chronic, hyperactive threat detection. The human mind lost the ability to hold complexity without experiencing severe distress.
Suddenly, the unknown wasn't just a mystery to observe. It was an immediate, lethal threat that had to be neutralized. And that structural shift completely reorganized human society, didn't it?
Completely. Communities fractured into these rigid, aggressive, tribal hierarchies. Humans became violently territorial. They turned workspaces and biological control centers into heavily guarded borders.
The archive details the slow, agonizing generational decay. Like, we literally began forcefully excluding our alien colleagues and forgot how to read the common archival notation.
The decay was so profound that humans actually forgot they were stationed on a biological construct. They looked up at the atmospheric containment field and just perceived a sky.
And they looked at their alien coworkers and saw terrifying monsters. We became entirely trapped within a localized delusion generated by our own sickened biology.
And the council just had to watch this terrifying decline happen for 200 years, paralyzed in this standoff, watching one of their founding races lose its mind.
Which eventually escalated until the council was forced to authorize a massive two-part intervention. Let's talk about the first phase, the Ark.
Right. So the Ark was not a physical vessel like a boat. It was a Solare genetic treatment administered covertly to specific human bloodlines that had the lowest viral concentration.
It functioned as like a multi-generational biological suppressor embedded in our non-coding DNA.
Exactly. It was designed to slowly, agonizingly burn the viral markers out of the human genome over a period of 8 to 15,000 years.
But the Ark was a very long-term play. It couldn't stop the immediate violent infection tearing the station apart right then. So they authorized the second phase, the flood.
Yes. And again, the flood was not merely a severe rainstorm. It was an acute, devastating atmospheric and oceanic adjustment.
Utilizing the station's own biological circulatory systems to create catastrophic surface conditions. And the explicit goal was to physically wipe out the human populations with the highest viral concentrations.
That is correct.
But wait, hold on. We are talking about an enlightened, highly advanced intergalactic council here. They spent 40 years debating a 41-clause treaty. But their solution to a medical crisis is to intentionally drown a massive portion of the population.
I know, it sounds awful.
How is this not just sanitized planetary extermination wrapped in bureaucratic red tape?
Well, the archive does not attempt to sanitize the horror of the flood. It presents it as the most agonizing decision in the history of the council. But you have to look at the terrible binary choice they faced.
Okay, what was the choice?
The Nephilian virus was not going to stop. It was permanently rewiring the human mind into a state of perpetual violence. And those infected humans were actively occupying the control surfaces of a machine that kept 36 different sentient races alive.
Ah, so we were trapped in a burning building and the humans were blocking the exits and actively attacking the firefighters.
Precisely. The choice was either to allow the virus to permanently destroy the human mind and trigger a failure of the entire station, killing billions across multiple species, or to perform a catastrophic reset.
A reset that would successfully contain the virus but require 11,000 years of healing. So they chose the reset. And the emotional fallout of that is staggering.
It really is. The archive explicitly notes the precise moments after the council authorized the flood. The 33 delegations did not adjourn. They didn't leave the room.
They just stayed in their seats in a completely silent, unrecorded session for 4 hours and 17 minutes.
Yeah, the lead archivist noted that some things require a room to hold them for a while. You have 33 distinct species sitting in absolute silence, absorbing the reality that they just authorized the drowning of their colleagues and friends.
The sheer weight of that guilt, just pressing down on the room. But they hit the reset button. The Ark treatment is hidden deep within the survivors, doing its work. 11,000 years pass.
Right.
So how does the council actually measure the recovery? How do they know when it's safe to end the quarantine?
They utilize a metric monitored by the Dravathi observation team called coherence.
And coherence was sitting at 94.7% just before the reintegration treaty was signed. But it isn't a direct medical measurement of the virus, right? Because the biological markers faded millennia ago.
Exactly. Coherence measures something much more profound. It's a metric of structural correspondence. The Drevothy track how closely humanity's internal collective model of reality aligns with the actual physical universe outside.
Like, do we still view the unknown as a lethal threat, or are we reclaiming that ancient low-resolution pressure?
Right. Are human categories and sociological understandings compatible with the truth of the galaxy?
So how does that coherence metric fluctuate over time?
Well, during the quarantine, the Drevothy recorded catastrophic dips in coherence during eras of extreme violence, religious inquisitions, and whenever human institutions drastically fragmented.
Basically, whenever we retreated into aggressive tribalism, coherence plummeted. But they noted a massive acceleration recently, and they correlated it directly with the internet, right?
Yes. Once humans started talking globally, sharing information instantaneously, and breaking down localized borders, we collectively started to remember our original nature.
The internet acted as this rudimentary simulation of the telepathic networks used by the galactic community. It forced us to confront massive amounts of complex, contradictory info without resorting to violence.
It was a literal rehabilitation of our cognitive architecture, which brings us to the most beautiful part of the archive, in my opinion, the work of the SSI.
Oh, the youngest race on the council. They took it upon themselves to comprehensively study human culture during the quarantine.
Right, they compiled the creative catalog, 11,000 specific entries of human art, music, literature, and architecture, and they identified a universal theme they called pre-coherent boundary awareness.
Pre-coherent boundary awareness. Think about like the grand architecture of ancient cathedrals designed to draw your eye up into this massive ceiling, or global mythologies of beings descending from the stars.
Or the sheer irrational obsession behind the space race, the desperate need to break through the atmosphere, even at the cost of human life.
Right. The Essassani argue that these aren't just metaphors, they are biological symptoms. It's our buried genetic memory of Earth Station trying to claw its way out.
It is a literal, persistent intuition that there is an invisible ceiling above us.
So think about the last time you stood on a dark beach, looking out at the ocean, or stared up at a clear night sky, and you felt that sudden, unexplainable nostalgia, that longing for a place you've never been.
The archive suggests that feeling is literal. It's the muted echo of your ancestors remembering the biological orbital rings.
We've spent 11,000 years painting and building rockets, desperately trying to articulate a home we forgot we were already living inside. It's just incredible.
It is, but it raises a big question. If our art and science have pushed coherence to 94.7%, what comprises the final 5.3%? Why has it stalled?
Yeah, and the Drevothy's answer is devastatingly simple. You cannot reach 100% coherence while you are still inside the quarantine.
Precisely. You cannot fully recover from a psychological sickness while trapped inside the hospital that treated it. The simulation of the quarantine creates artificial constraints.
To close that final gap, you have to actually re-enter reality. The final healing is the act of the return itself.
Exactly. So humanity's getting closer to the threshold. But we aren't doing this alone. We have an audience. The archive includes this section called the Almanac of the 12.
Yeah, detailing the incredible psychological diversity of the alien races monitoring us, the watchers and the waiters.
Right. It reveals how vastly different psychologies manage a millennia-long wait. Take the Pleiadians, for example. They are highly empathetic, resonant beings.
Their biology produces a physical resonance that feels like a comforting warmth, right? So how do they handle watching their friends suffer in quarantine for 11,000 years?
Through an astonishing act of persistent devotion. The archive notes that after every single formal council session for 11,000 years, the Pleiadian delegation held informal discussion periods.
They deliberately gathered around those 3 empty human chairs.
Yes, maintaining their biological resonance, essentially keeping the physical space warm for a ghost, treating the empty seats as if the occupants were just delayed in transit.
Oh, that is just heartbreaking. They refused to let the space grow cold. But then you contrast that warmth with the sheer logic of the Sirians.
The Sirians evolved on a blindingly bright world. Their neural architecture operates on dual analytical and intuitive tracks. They perceive the universe entirely through statistical probabilities.
And they actually filed a formal dissent against the reintegration treaty. They voted against ending the quarantine because their models indicated the confidence intervals around the 94.7% coherence were too wide.
They argued the mass wasn't tight enough to guarantee a safe re-entry.
Which honestly feels incredibly cold. After all that suffering and the Pleiadians keeping the chairs warm, the Syrians want to keep the door locked over a statistical technicality.
It seems cold to us, but you have to understand the Syrian philosophy of governance. A formal dissent isn't an act of hostility for them. It's a profound act of faith in a governing body.
Wait, how is dissenting an act of faith?
They are basically saying, our specific metric indicates a flaw, and we are noting it for the historical record. However, we implicitly trust the mechanism of the council.
Ah, so they accept the majority decision anyway.
Yes, because to them, a systemic mechanism only holds value if you submit to it, even when you vehemently disagree with the outcome. Procedural integrity is their highest form of devotion.
That drastically reframes it. It's not coldness at all. And then you have the Lyrans, our direct genetic ancestors, who fiercely negotiated Clause 7 over a 40-year period.
Yes, the non-culpability clause.
Mhm.
The Lyrans anticipated the psychological shock of emergence. They knew the very first question humans would ask upon waking up to the reality of the flood is, what did we do to deserve this?
Because, of course, we would instantly blame ourselves. We would assume it was a divine punishment for our inherent brokenness.
Right, so the Lyrans demanded it be written in binding galactic law that humanity bears zero moral blame for the mutiny. They needed the treaty to explicitly state you were biologically sick. It was not a punishment.
It was triage. Man, the empathy there is incredible. And tying it all together are the Tausetians, the legal scholars who brought this immense clarity, culminating in Clause 41.
Clause 41 dictates that once emergence occurs, humans will eventually choose their own delegates based on whatever messy traditions they formed during isolation. And it concludes, the council will not specify, the council will wait.
It really is a masterclass in bureaucratic empathy. They don't force the Pleiadians to stop mourning, and they don't force the Syrians to ignore their math.
They just build a system that allows wildly different truths to coexist.
But that leads to the big logistical question. The coherence threshold is finally reached. How do you actually execute the end of the quarantine? How do you tell 8 billion people their universe is a biological construct?
That terrifying task falls to the Yahiel. The Yahiel sequence of first contact is a fascinating study in cognitive psychology.
They spent 6 years prepping for this, and their central question is so heavy. How do you tell someone the absolute truth without fundamentally breaking their mind?
Because Dravathi modeling showed a severe risk. If you hit a population with sudden, absolute truth that shatters their paradigm, it triggers a biological response called cognitive defense.
Meaning they won't integrate the new reality, they'll aggressively defend their false reality.
Exactly. They will rapidly build new social and political structures specifically designed to defend the delusion.
So if a massive alien mothership just lands on the White House lawn, we wouldn't be grateful for the clarification. We would literally declare war on reality itself.
Yes. You cannot introduce a structural paradigm shift faster than a biological system can physically integrate it. So the Yahiel designed a meticulous 3-phase plan.
To slowly titrate reality back into our consciousness. Phase 1 began roughly 40 years prior to the treaty. Distant, highly ambiguous atmospheric anomaly.
Unexplained phenomena that human radar could detect, but human science couldn't easily identify.
So the goal wasn't to boldly announce their presence. It was to let us organically build a network of attention. People looking up, sharing grainy videos, cross-referencing data.
They seeded the environment with mysteries to activate our curiosity. Then Phase 2 brought the phenomena much closer. Close range, undeniably artificial geometric forms operating in deliberate patterns.
And the intent there was to directly challenge human scientific methodology, forcing us to officially admit there was a flaw in our understanding of physics.
Right. And this reframes how we view skepticism. The skeptics trying to debunk these forms aren't failing to see the truth. Their skepticism is the cognitive process working exactly as intended.
Oh, I love that. A population critically examining anomalies is a population stretching its mental capacity. Getting ready. Which leads to Phase 3. Actual contact.
The brilliance of Phase 3 lies in the minimal true statement. The Yahiel drafted over 40 versions of what to say upon landing.
And they discarded almost all of them because they provided too much info. If you give an organism an absolute answer before it has formulated the question, you shut down its mind.
So they settled on a statement of just 6 words. The archive doesn't reveal the words, but the goal wasn't to answer the mystery, it was just to open a door.
And the Yahiel were selected for this because they are biologically suited to bypass our threat detection rate. They look almost indistinguishable from humans.
Yes, bipedal and physically symmetrical. So the ancient primate flight reflex isn't triggered. However, they possess an extreme facial symmetry and an absolute physical stillness that creates a profound, uncanny valley effect.
So they look human, but your brain knows subconsciously that something is fundamentally off.
And that unsettling feeling is intentional. It bypasses the violent flight reflex, but triggers just enough cognitive dissonance to forcefully loosen the human mind's grip on its false reality.
It induces this disorientation, putting the mind in a receptive state to search for a new understanding. This brings us right back to our pre-virus trait low-resolution pressure.
Yes, the Yahil are actively utilizing our best historical trait to save us. They are intentionally triggering our ability to sit with a mystery.
Breadcrumbing reality to us so the realization is earned, like slowly waking a sleepwalker so you don't give them a heart attack.
It is a meticulously calculated act of care. And this centuries-long planning pays off. The metric ticks over the threshold. The 11,000-year alarm rings.
Coherence hits 95% on an incredibly ordinary Thursday. No grand celestial alignment, no trumpets, just a Thursday. And then the Yahil make contact the following Tuesday.
In the chamber, the Anunnaki archivist formally updates the registry. Seats 34, 35, and 36 are officially changed to pending delegation.
But what's crucial is what doesn't happen. Earth station itself doesn't physically change. The oceans keep circulating, the atmosphere keeps breathing.
The biological ceiling of the terrarium does not physically lift. The only thing that changes is the internal psychological relationship of the inhabitants to the space they occupy.
We finally know where we are, and the true emotional crescendo isn't the physical landing, it is the unsealing of the deep archive.
After 11 millennia of profound amnesia, humanity has handed back its own history.
We get to read about the 4-hour silent session. We read the Laren note passed down. They are still in there. The virus did not get everything. We see the Asa Sinai catalog showing every cathedral was an attempt to remember.
It is the ultimate restitution of human dignity. But the archives concludes with a really fascinating final detail about the timeline. Following the emergence declaration, it takes a full 14 years for humanity to actually physically fill those 3 empty chairs.
14 years. Just to send 3 delegates. But when you think about the geopolitical, religious, and psychological chaos that must have gripped Earth, it makes sense.
Consider the ontological shock playing out on a planetary scale. Every major world religion must instantly recontextualize its theology.
Every sovereign government must realize its borders are basically drawn on the dirt of a terrarium floor. The first few years must have been pure panic.
Economic collapse, the concept of resource scarcity being completely redefined by a self-sustaining space station.
And then trying to convince thousands of warring nations to agree on a single governing tradition. How do you elect 3 individuals to represent the entire human experience to an alien council?
It would have been a messy, terrifying 14 years of rebuilding. But true to Clause 41, the council did not intervene. They allowed humanity the dignity of struggling through their own rebirth.
They waited. And eventually the chairs were filled. The archive notes the date and the names, but deliberately leaves the raw emotion of that moment to the oral tradition.
The document provides the structural truth, but acknowledges that the emotional truth belongs to the people who lived it.
You know, we started this deep dive talking about how history is usually presented as a clean timeline. But this source material completely shatters that. It presents this epic about the agonizing patience of biology.
It illustrates the staggering weight of institutional memory carried by the Anunnaki and the Syrians.
But mostly it's a testament to human curiosity. We were traumatized, locked in a jar, and we still spent 11,000 years painting and looking up, trying to remember the stars.
The virus made humanity violently small, but it could not extinguish the core shape of who we were.
So next time you look up at a clear night sky and feel that weird, nostalgic longing, maybe it's not just poetry. Maybe it's your biology remembering the station. Maybe it's you reaching for the ceiling.
And if we can end on one final lingering detail embedded deep within the archive, deep in the Mariana Trench, the lowest point of the ocean, there's a specific set of markings carved into the wall.
Which are not a formal language or a map, right?
No, they are simply unconscious, idle, fidgeting scratches made by a human maintenance crew 11,000 years ago, right before the mutant began.
Just somebody bored on a maintenance shift waiting to clock out.
Precisely. But Earth Station's biological systems perfectly preserved those random scratches for 11 millennia. The systems didn't understand why the marks were important. They just recognized biological material deliberately placed there.
So it ruthlessly maintained them through the flood, through the quarantine, through everything.
Yes. In an incomprehensibly vast universe, biology and time do not solely preserve grand treaties. They
Yeah.
perfectly preserve the idle fidgeting of a human hand, waiting 11,000 years for its descendants to finally come back down, trace the grooves, and recognize it.
You break your arm, an x-ray shows the clean line, and the doctor says, there it is. You look at an idle scratch on the bottom of the ocean, meticulously preserved by a living alien station for 11,000 years, and the universe says, you are here, and you are back.